The sun hung low over the Toltec city of Tollen, casting long shadows over its red stone temples and bustling plazas. The air smelled of roasted maize and incense, but none of it touched Xochitl's heart. She stood barefoot on the cold stone floor of her family's courtyard, wrists bound in soft fiber rope, her long black hair falling like a curtain over her downcast eyes. She was 14, and her fate had been sealed with a handshake between men. Her father, a stoneworker known more for debts than skill, had traded her to a merchant clan from the distant lakeside city of Coatzacoalcos. "She will serve you well," he'd said, never once looking her in the eye-size. Her mother had stayed inside, wailing softly behind a reed curtain. Xochitl did not cry. She had known this day was coming. Ever since her father had lost their home in a gambling dispute, she had noticed how often strange men visited, how their gazes lingered on her, how the whispers grew louder. "She's young," they'd say. "She's beautiful. She will fetch a good price." And now, that price had been paid. Her new owner, a wide-shouldered merchant named Akech, was a man with calloused hands and quiet eyes, the kind that held no cruelty, but no kindness either. He placed a hand on her shoulder as they walked toward the waiting caravan. It was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a chain. As they exited the courtyard, Xochitl turned once to see her childhood friend Itzkua standing at the edge of the crowd. He was a hunter's apprentice now, lean and sharp-eyed, with a jaguar-toothed necklace his father had carved. Their eyes met only for a second, but in that second, something passed between them, rage, sorrow, a promise unspoken. He did not speak. He simply lowered his head and disappeared into the crowd. The journey to Coatzacoalcos was long and cruel. They traveled on foot through thick jungle paths, across muddy rivers, past villages that whispered and watched but never intervened. Akech's caravan was quiet, 5 men, 2 pack animals, and 1 girl with eyes like obsidian. At night she lay on cold mats under the stars, listening to the drumming of frogs and the rustle of jaguars in the distance. No one spoke to her, and she did not speak back. When they finally arrived, the city was a gleaming jewel by the water, filled with wide canals, painted canoes, and rows of market stalls that buzzed with trade. But for Xochitl, it felt like a prison gilded in color. Her new clan gave her a linen dress and a place in the servant quarters. She scrubbed floors, carried water, and served without complaint. But every night, she dreamed of home, of the tall cactus where she and Itzkua once hid from elders, of the laughing river, of a life stolen too soon. And far away, in the jungle city of Tollen, Itzkua was sharpening more than just arrows. He was sharpening a plan. Itzkua hadn't spoken a word since the caravan disappeared beyond the horizon. The city of Tollen carried on. Merchants shouted over prices, priests sang beneath obsidian pyramids, and children played in the courtyards. But to him, the world had stopped the moment Xochitl was taken. He moved through the days like a shadow, his mind replaying her silent farewell. Her eyes had burned into him, not with fear, but with something far heavier. Trust. And that trust now felt like a weight he couldn't set down. He was no longer the wide-eyed boy who used to chase lizards through market stalls with her. He had trained under his uncle, a hunter and war scout who had fought in border skirmishes and tracked jaguars through the densest forests. Itzkua had learned how to walk without sound, how to shoot an arrow through a squirrel's eye, how to read trails like woven cloth. But he had never learned how to live with powerlessness. That morning, while the sun was still rising and the jungle mist clung to the air, he went to his uncle's hut. The old man was sharpening a flint blade, his fingers steady as stone. Without waiting to be acknowledged, Itzkua knelt before him. "I want to leave Tollen," he said, voice low. "I want to go south, to Coatzacoalcos." The hunter looked up slowly, his weathered face unreadable. "You're not ready," he said. "You think you're doing this for honor, for pride, but those things will get you killed." Itzkua didn't flinch. "I'm not doing it for pride. I'm doing it for her." The words hung in the air, quiet and sharp. The hunter sighed and handed him the blade. Then you need to know how to kill without hesitating, and how to walk without being seen. You leave in 3 nights. Until then, you train like your life depends on it. Because it does. For the next 3 days, Itzkua became a ghost. He ran barefoot across thorns until his soles bled. He climbed trees taller than temples. He slept 2 hours a night and practiced in silence. And when the 3rd night came, he wrapped his jaguar tooth necklace around his wrist, slung a bow across his back, and vanished into the forest with nothing but a water pouch, a blade, and the memory of her eyes. The journey south was perilous. Snakes slithered through roots that tried to trip him. Storms cracked through the canopy like drums of war. Twice he had to hide from bandits, crouched under leaves as their laughter echoed like death. But with every step, the image of Xochitl kneeling in the dust gave him strength. He didn't know what he'd find in Coatzacoalcos. He didn't know how many guards or gates or dangers stood between them. But he knew one thing. She wasn't gone. Not yet. Not if he could still draw breath and fight. And so, the boy who once hunted birds now hunted something far more dangerous. A way to bring her home. Coatzacoalcos shimmered like a dream carved in stone and water. The canals stretched like veins through its heart, lined with painted boats and towering homes built from polished clay. Markets burst with colors, red chilies, yellow corn, green feathers, purple dye, and the sound of trade never stopped. But beneath the beauty, Xochitl felt none of its wonder. Her world was small. Stone floors to scrub, water jars to carry, meals to serve in silence. Her new clan treated her well enough, but there was no kindness in their rules. She belonged to them now, as surely as a pot belonged to a shelf. Her tasks began before sunrise and ended after dusk. Her hands were cracked from grinding maize. Her shoulders ached from hauling water from the canal, yet she never spoke of pain, nor let her eyes fall empty. She refused to be broken, not by strangers, not by fate. She had no one to speak to. No one knew her story. To them, she was just another girl sold from the north. But each night when she lay curled on her mat, she whispered into the dark. "You remember, don't you, Itzkua? You promised you'd never let me vanish." Somewhere deep inside her, she believed he was coming. He had to be. A week passed, then 2. She lost count. But one day, as she walked past the canal near the southern gate, balancing a basket of fruit on her hip, her breath caught. A figure was crouched by the water, washing his hands. Tall, lean, with long hair tied back and a bow slung over his back. She blinked, heart pounding. It couldn't be. But he turned. Their eyes locked. Her basket fell, scattering mangoes across the stones. The man didn't speak. He just gave the faintest nod, like a hawk seeing prey from a distance. And then he was gone, vanished into the crowd, leaving only silence and a thudding in her chest. That night, Xochitl didn't sleep. Her pulse beat like drums. He was here. He had come. But she didn't know what it meant. Could he reach her? Would he try? And if he did, what price would he pay? Meanwhile, Itzkua crouched on a rooftop across the canal, watching the courtyard where she lived. He had confirmed her location through hushed conversations and bribes given with pelts and precious seeds. He had tracked her from shadows, memorized the changing of guards, studied the habits of her clan. This city was not Tallinn. It was a maze, bigger, louder, filled with dangers he didn't yet understand. But now he knew where she was, and that was enough. The hardest part wasn't finding her. It was waiting for the moment he could act without getting her killed. So for now, he stayed in the dark, eyes sharp, heart steady, and plan forming. Xochitl was not alone. Not anymore. Xochitl moved through her days with a new rhythm, her body doing its chores while her mind wandered to rooftops and shadowed canals. She no longer felt entirely trapped, not now that she knew he was near. But the knowledge was a double-edged blade. It gave her hope, yes, but it also filled her with dread. If Itzkua had come, then he would act. And if he acted, there would be danger. Every morning she scanned the horizon. Every evening she listened for unusual sounds. A whistle that didn't belong, a footstep too light, a breath where no one stood. She became more alert, more aware, and she started to notice things. Guards who grew lazy at dusk, servants who whispered gossip after too much pulka, a side gate near the kitchens that was rarely watched. If he was planning something, she had to help, quietly, subtly, without raising alarm. So she started collecting slivers of information, tucking them away in the corners of her thoughts like seeds waiting for rain. Meanwhile, Itzkua watched. From rooftops, from alley shadows, from market stalls. He learned the layout of the clan compound, the schedule of the kitchen staff, the changing of the canal guards. He noted when Xochitl walked alone, when she was surrounded, when she was safest. He mapped the terrain in his mind like a hunter stalks prey, but his was not a kill, it was a rescue, and the risks were greater than any jaguar. His heart battled between caution and urgency. Each day he waited, she was still a prisoner. But a wrong move could see them both dead. So he searched for allies, and he found one. A boy named Malinal, younger than him, barely 13, but clever and fast. Malinal was a water runner, delivering messages by boat and sneaking between city gates like a fish through reeds. For a price, he agreed to help. Itzkua taught him to whistle a code. Short, sharp bursts. 1 for danger, 2 for clear, 3 for go. The plan was simple. A storm was coming, and with it, distraction. When the thunder fell and the city turned its attention to the skies, Malinal would signal from the opposite side of the canal. Itzkua would breach the compound and find Xochitl, and they would run. Xochitl sensed it before it began. That night, the air turned heavy. Clouds rolled in, thick and low. Thunder cracked once in the distance. She knew, she felt it in her blood. This was the night. She slipped a small obsidian knife beneath her sash, just in case. Just before the sky opened, she heard it. 2 sharp whistles. Her heart raced. He was close. Freedom was close. But freedom, she knew, always came with a price. And as the first drops of rain fell on the city of Canals, a girl and a boy prepared to rewrite their fate. One from within, one from without. Together, storm or no storm, they would try. The rain came in sheets, drowning the sounds of the city beneath a curtain of thunder and rushing water. Wind howled through the canals, sending painted boats crashing into stone walls and scattering market tents like fallen leaves. The storm was fierce and sudden, perfect for what Itzkua needed. Clad in soaked leather and mud-smeared skin, he moved through the shadows like a jaguar in the jungle. His bow was slung across his back, unused. This wasn't a battle of arrows. This was a hunt for silence. On the far side of the compound, Malinal had lit a torch and tossed it into a pile of dry reed baskets. Flames bloomed just as lightning lit the sky. Chaos exploded. Servants screamed. Guards ran toward the blaze. Itzkua seized the moment. He scaled the outer wall, fingertips slipping on wet stone, legs burning. Once atop the ledge, he paused, heart hammering, and then dropped silently into the courtyard. He knew exactly where to go. Xochitl had passed through the courtyard every morning at sunrise. He'd memorized every step of her path. He dashed across the stone path, crouched beneath a stone archway, and reached the servant quarters. The door was unlocked. She was waiting. She stood in the center of the dark room, the obsidian knife in her hand glinting faintly in the stormlight. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They just looked at each other for one heavy second. Then he grabbed her hand and pulled her into the rain. The world outside was madness. Smoke from the fire curled through the air. Guards were shouting. Dogs barked from somewhere near the canal. The escape wasn't clean. It couldn't be. They sprinted through puddles, ducking under archways and weaving through half-collapsed stalls. Twice they had to stop and hide as patrols passed, soaked and shivering behind piles of broken crates. But the gate was near, the one Xochitl had marked in her mind, the one that was rarely watched. When they reached it, They found only one guard, distracted by the fire and the storm. Itzkua lunged before the man even saw them, slamming the butt of his blade into the guard's temple. The man crumpled without a sound. Xochitl opened the gate. Beyond it, the world widened. Open jungle, thick and dark, waiting to swallow them whole. They didn't hesitate. They ran. For hours they ran, through mud and thorns and branches that whipped their faces raw. Their breaths were ragged, their legs nearly useless, but they didn't stop. Not until the lights of Coatzacoalcos had vanished behind them, swallowed by rain and smoke. Only then did they collapse beneath a ceiba tree, gasping, trembling, alive. The storm had become a whisper now, a soft patter on the leaves. Xochitl looked at him through the dark, her voice hoarse. "You came." Itzkua nodded. "I said I would." And with that, for the first time in what felt like years, she let herself cry. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the miracle of freedom found in the heart of a storm. Dawn broke slowly, casting golden light over a jungle soaked in rain and silence. The birds had returned, chirping cautiously from treetops, and steam rose from the earth like breath from an ancient beast. Beneath the wide arms of a ceiba tree, Xochitl stirred. Her legs ached. Her clothes clung to her skin. But she was free. She blinked at the sunlight, hardly believing the night had been real. Yet there he was, Itzkua, sitting cross-legged beside her, sharpening a stick into a spear, eyes scanning the trees with the quiet of a predator. "We can't rest long," he said without looking at her. "They'll search the rivers first, then the forest." She nodded, pushing herself upright. Every muscle screamed, but she didn't complain. The escape was behind them. The real danger had only begun. The jungle did not welcome them. It tested them. The trail south to the Borderlands was treacherous, winding through thorn-thick groves, steep hills and marshes that stank of rot. The rain had soaked everything, making footing treacherous and food scarce. They had to ration what little dried maize Itzkua carried. Water they found in leaves and hollowed trees, but the insects were relentless, biting through cloth and skin. Still, Xochitl did not falter. She moved with a new determination. She wasn't just a girl escaping. She was reclaiming her life, one bleeding footstep at a time. Itzkua taught her how to listen to the forest, how to spot snakes before they struck, how to use mud as camouflage and cooling balm. He never spoke of Tollen, never asked her what she endured in the merchant's house. He gave her space, but every night he kept watch while she slept. And every morning, she found small gifts left near her sleeping mat. Berries, feathers, a flower with petals the color of her eyes. These quiet acts became their language. On the 5th day, they heard dogs. Far off, but unmistakable. Snarling, barking, the pounding of feet. Searchers. Xochitl froze, her breath catching. "We're not far enough," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But we're close." He pulled her to the side, leading her off the main trail, into a grove thick with roots and ferns. "There's a river ahead," he said. "If we reach it by nightfall, we can take it downstream. No scent, no tracks." They moved faster now, urgency overriding fatigue. The howls grew louder behind them. The jungle, once a shield, had become a trap. But just as dusk fell and hope began to flicker, they heard it. The rush of water. The river, wide and wild and surging. Without hesitation, they plunged into its current, letting it carry them far from the sounds of pursuit. When they finally dragged themselves onto a rocky bank miles downriver, the jungle had gone quiet again. They collapsed, too tired to speak, too alive to sleep. For the first time since they fled, Xochitl looked up at the stars and smiled. They had survived the dogs, the fire, the flood. But the hardest part still lay ahead. Finding a place where no one would ever own her again. The river had bought them time, but not peace. As Xochitl and Itzkua made their way deeper into the Borderlands, those lawless regions where clans lost their names and power bent to survival, they found a different kind of danger. This was not the controlled cruelty of cities. This was the wild's chaos. Here, paths vanished into vines. The trees grew so thick they shut out the sun, and the nights echoed with howls not even Itzkua could name. But worse than beasts were the men who moved without drums or gods. Raiders, slavers, exiles with no homeland but hunger. They traveled by night now, careful to leave no fire, no scent. Each meal was a gamble, raw roots, bitter fruits, sometimes nothing. But Xochitl didn't complain. She had grown leaner, harder, and more alert. She no longer flinched at sounds in the dark. She moved like a shadow beside Itzkua, her blade always within reach. Still, fear had not left her. It lived quietly inside, like a snake under leaves. One evening they came upon a half-burned shrine, a stone altar covered in soot, with bones piled beside it. A warning or a remnant, they didn't know. They moved on in silence. "How far to the trader's path?" Xochitl asked as they crossed a fallen log. 3 days, Itzkua said. "Maybe less if we move faster. And after that, we find a village that doesn't ask questions, or we keep going until we do." She nodded. It was enough. But fate, once again, had other plans. On the second night, just before dawn, Xochitl woke to a sound she hadn't heard since Coatzacoalcos. Voices, rough, male, close. She sat up and found Itzkua already crouched beside her, bow drawn. 5 of them, he whispered. "Too close. They've seen the river trail." Her blood chilled. They couldn't outrun horses. Not now. "What do we do?" she asked. "We separate," he said. "You take the slope east. I'll lead them west. We meet at the stone arch tomorrow. If I don't come, you keep moving." "No." Her voice cracked. "We stay together. If we do, we're caught." He gripped her shoulders, his voice low but fierce. "You know how to survive now. I showed you. You can make it." "I didn't come this far to lose you," she said, eyes flashing. "And I didn't come this far to see you chained again," he answered. A pause. Then, with shaking hands, she pressed her forehead to his. No words, just breath. Then she ran, east, into thorns, into night. Behind her, shouts rose and arrows flew, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The jungle swallowed her again, alone, her blade in hand, her heart a drum. By dawn her legs were failing, her mouth dry, but on the edge of a clearing she saw it, a stone arch rising from the forest like a broken monument. She waited. 1 hour, 2, 3. Then she heard it. Footsteps, and a familiar voice whispering, "You came." She ran toward it, toward him, and for that moment hope lived again. Itzkua was limping, his left arm wrapped in a strip of bark-soaked cloth, stained dark with blood. But he smiled when he saw her. Not the wild grin of boys chasing birds in Tollen, but a quiet, battered smile of someone who had gambled everything and lived to see morning. 1 arrow, he said as they crouched beneath the arch. Grazed me. I lost them in the gorge. Xochitl knelt beside him, tearing strips from her tunic to reinforce the bandage. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. "You could have died." "I didn't. You will, if we don't find help soon." He touched her wrist gently. "We're close. 2 more days." But neither of them knew what waited ahead. The borderlands were thinning now. The trees parted more often, the air less dense, the silence heavier. They passed abandoned huts, fields gone to weed, and half-carved totems forgotten by time. Each mile reminded them, freedom had no path, only persistence. On the second evening, smoke rose in the distance, thin and white, a sign of life. Too neat to be raiders, too small for a city. They approached carefully, weaving through tall grass until a village emerged, built along a rocky ridge, its homes low and round, with smoke curling from stone vents. Children played near a maize patch. Old women stirred pots, but everyone moved with caution, eyes darting to shadows. Strangers weren't welcomed here. When Itzkua and Xochitl stepped from the trees, conversation stopped. A man with silver rings through both ears stepped forward. His body was lean, wrapped in woven cloth, and his face bore the calm of a storm before it broke. "We don't give shelter to fugitives," he said before they even spoke. "We're not fugitives," Xochitl replied. "We're just trying to live." The man studied her, her torn clothes, her blistered feet, the blade at her side. Then he looked at Itzkua, pale with pain but still standing. "What did you run from?" "Chains," she said. "What did you run to?" "Choice." A pause. Then the man stepped aside. "One night. No promises." They were led to a hut near the edge, where a healer smeared crushed roots onto Itzkua's wound and gave them maize cakes still warm from the fire. It was more comfort than they'd known in weeks. That night, as they lay side by side on mats, Xochitl stared at the flickering ceiling. "What if they report us?" she whispered. "Then we run again," he said. "Until when?" He turned toward her. "Until we build something no one can take from us." And in that fragile space between exhaustion and sleep, she believed him. The next morning, the village elder returned. He sat cross-legged and placed 2 clay tokens between them, one marked with the sign of a hawk, the other a flame. "We don't take in many," he said, "but those who have earned freedom with blood, they remind us what it costs." And so, with nothing but scars and hope, the girl who had been sold and the boy who defied the world for her were given a choice: to stay or to keep running. They chose to stay, not because they felt safe, but because they were tired of fleeing, tired of sleeping with one eye open, tired of being ghosts in a world that never offered them roots. The village, small, cautious, hardened by years of watching the empire shift and consume, didn't greet them with smiles, but with watchful patience. Trust, they learned, was not given. It was built. So they built. Xochitl rose with the sun and helped in the maize fields, her fingers thick with soil, her back aching from hours bent over, but her spirit steady. She learned to grind grain with the old women, to stitch bark cloth for trade, to carry water in silence without needing to explain her scars. She became known not for the story that chased her, but for the way she worked. Quiet, tireless, unbending. Itzkua, once a shadow with a blade, became something else. His injury healed slowly, but his hands never stilled. He helped repair broken walls, carved new bows from yew, and hunted just enough to feed but never to impress. He watched the trees more than the people, but gradually the children began to follow him, mimicking his stealth, laughing when he taught them how to find edible roots or mimic bird calls. The village was still wary, but less so. The healer left herbs outside their hut. A boy left a fish by their door. A girl brought Xochitl a dyed sash, rough but lovingly woven. Slowly, the fire of belonging began to catch. At night, they sat outside their hut, watching sparks rise from the communal flames. "Do you think they'll ever come for us?" Xochitl asked one evening. "Maybe," Itzkua replied, "but we're no longer the same." "If they do," he shrugged, "then we don't run. We defend what we've built." She leaned her head against his shoulder, eyes on the stars. "I never thought freedom would look like dirt under my nails." "Freedom's never clean," he said. "It's fought for, fed, shared." By the first full moon since they'd arrived, the village elders called a gathering. They spoke of watchtowers needing building, fields needing hands, dangers still lingering along the borderlands. Then the silver-ringed leader turned to Xochitl and Itzkua. "You came from fire," he said, "and didn't burn. That means something." He offered them a place, not just shelter, but a voice in what was built next. "You don't owe us anything," he said, "but we'll stand with those who choose to stand with us." They didn't need to look at each other to decide. They had run enough, bled enough, hoped enough. This wasn't the life stolen from them. It was the one they were now building with bare hands and wounded hearts. And so, a girl once sold and a boy once silent helped plant new roots in a place untouched by empire, where names were earned, not inherited. And for the first time, the fire they sat beside didn't just keep them warm. It reminded them they had finally begun to live. Seasons passed like whispers in the leaves, and with them, the story of Xochitl and Itzcuaa wove itself into the roots of the village. They were no longer outsiders, no longer fugitives. They were simply part of the land, like the river that curved nearby, like the wind that bent the tall maize without breaking it. The villagers stopped glancing over their shoulders when they passed. Children greeted them by name. The elders began seeking their counsel, and together they transformed survival into something richer, a life. Xochitl became a teacher, not of books, there were none, but of memory, of wisdom carried through hands and breath. She taught girls how to mend nets, how to read the clouds, how to speak without begging. She taught them to be fire wrapped in calm. Her voice was never loud, but it carried like a drum through every lesson. She wasn't just respected. She was remembered. And Itzcuaa, he became the forest's echo. He trained young boys how to move without being seen, how to hunt with honor, how to sense danger in the stillness. Yet, more than that, he taught them when not to fight. A sharp blade is nothing, he told them, if your mind is dull. One night, under a sky thick with stars, the village gathered for the festival of new moons. It was tradition. Each family gave thanks, shared food, offered song. But this time the elders called Xochitl and Itzcuaa to the center. The silver-ringed man, now with hair grayer than bark, spoke clearly. You came here broken. You stayed and became whole. You bled with us, worked beside us, and proved that names aren't given. They're earned. From his satchel he pulled a carved stone, black obsidian, etched with fire and feather. This is your name. You carry it together. You are now Tlazopili, precious root. Not because you were born of us, but because you planted something worth growing. The crowd murmured in approval. Children clapped. Drums began to beat slow and deep. Xochitl took the stone in her palm, her fingers closing around it like a vow. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something greater, completion. Itzcuaa looked at her, not as the boy who once watched her disappear, but as the man who had brought her back and stayed to build something no hand could sell. That night, they didn't speak of the past. They danced beneath the stars, their feet light on soil that now knew their story. The scars on their skin remained, but they no longer hurt. They sang. And when the fire dimmed and the village quieted, and they lay in their small home on the edge of the trees, Xochitl whispered, "We were never meant to belong where we were born." Itzcuaa pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "No, we were meant to become something new." And so they did. Not slaves, not fugitives, not survivors. They became the kind of people who, when remembered, were remembered with respect. They had earned their name.